Yeah, I was asked to speak here, and we're done with Bitcoin 101. I was going to roll out that slide deck, but then I was like, this audience deserves something a little bit more important and a little bit closer to this community. And one of the things that I wanted to do is try and say, like, what does it mean to actually build a data company in a market where doesn't everyone just have the data? Isn't that the whole purpose of the blockchain, is that everyone has access to this information? So just a little bit about the company, since we're not that familiar to this community. We're about 75 people today in 11 different countries. We have an office in Copenhagen, where I was this morning, and office in New York and an office in DC. What I wanted to say is, we started, and maybe some people might know, we started with like the Mount Gox investigation. Probably some people in this room lost money in Mount Gox, I can imagine. And we went looking for where it went, and we're contracted by the trustee to look into that, and actually built some investigation tools. But I wanted to say that, like, this is my view of the blockchain. The blockchain is, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Okay? So, like, the nice thing about blockchains is that the truth is in, like, there is no one who argues about what the data that people are interested in. The truth is inside the blockchain. The other thing that's interesting about blockchains is that they are incredibly easy to integrate. Okay? You download the Bitcoin client, you now have all the data, you download Litecoin, you then run an Ethereum node, and if it doesn't crash on you, then you have all the data. So all these different blockchains are sort of somewhat easy to get your hands on. So, they contain the truth, they're very easy to get your hand on, and actually, the record is there forever. And the goblin, the Satoshi Nakamoto, or whatever we want to call it, never forgets what data is inside the blockchain. So there's a perfect record. So that then, like, the question becomes, like, well, how do you then build the moat between you and, like, all the other people that are trying to look at this data set? Because ultimately, the value that I provide as a company is that we are able to tell the underlying purpose behind cryptocurrency transactions better than anyone else in the world. And, like, my fundamental value is being able to do that better than anyone else. And how do I do it today better than someone who's even going to enter the market tomorrow because they've just heard about blockchain and they're so excited to get into our business? I wanted to dive in a little bit and say, like, well, how does this all work? What do we really do? What does it mean to build this moat around our company? So, blockchains are engineered for consistency. They want to tell the truth all the time, but not necessarily to, like, yield intelligence. And so, anyone who's trying to make a decision on whether, they should process a specific transaction, whether they should be investigating something, or whether there's, like, the correct market allocation, they need to understand what the underlying purpose behind these transactions are. So, there's an ordering of transactions. The transactions are all consistent, but, how does it really link into the real world? I actually put kind of 3 steps in here. So we basically have, a basic premise, which is that we can cluster transactions together. What does that really mean? That means that you can have a sequence of Bitcoin transactions that reveal that they were actually all done by the same piece of wallet software. So can you go and data mine the same way that anyone has access to this data? Can you get together and say, these 20 transactions were all done by the same wallet? The next thing that you really want to solve for is to say, well, can you then attribute that wallet to something in the real world? Is it the Silk Road wallet, or is it, Mount Gox, or is it BitPay, or whatever, or is it a ransomware campaign? So there needs to be some level of, like, attribution that you have to do. And the nice thing is that actually once you make some of this attribution, now you've annotated that, these 300,000 transactions were all done by this same wallet. and this wallet was actually, a ransomware campaign, can we then start to learn about the behavior of that wallet and go backwards and repeat step one to say, can we write more sophisticated clustering algorithms based on better ground truth data? And so this is exactly what we do. So I wanted to sort of say, well, why does this actually create some advantage? Because doesn't it mean, you've just told me that all the data is there all the time. There's enough smart people in this room that if we get together and we start doing this today, we can build a better Chainalysis. That's not what I came here to do, but maybe we can do that afterwards. The problem is that services die. So lots of Bitcoin services, lots of Bitcoin brands that have been in existence, actually they're no longer with us. So if you were not there actually transacting at the time with that entity and actually making transactions with them, you can't actually ever identify them on the blockchain. And so, the fact that the blockchain transactions today recorded on the blockchain depend on things that happened in the past, if you could never interact with that past, you will know nothing what happens at today's blockchain. So the other thing is, and sort of somewhat related to that, is that actually services that exist, these wallets like gambling sites and exchanges, they actually move their wallets from time to time. They actually, for security purposes, for other reasons, they actually start to move their wallets. And so if you didn't actually transact with them while they were running a particular version of the wallet software, you might lose them. And then the third thing, which I'll come back to, is that actually, even if we're making transactions, we have a team of analysts that are going out and making transactions with all of these different services, even when we do that, we might only get a small portion of a service, and actually, you might need to make transactions over a long period of time in order to capture the whole wallet, even if they're not moving their wallet around. So these are some of the reasons why actually you need to be there at the time making transactions on the Bitcoin network in order to get attribution data on, is this a gambling site or is this a darknet market? So that allows us to basically identify some of the services that are controlled by people. So this is like an example where we're looking for people cashing out at particular exchanges. I sometimes joke that cyber criminals also need to pay their rent and vacation bills. So that was the case of the Mount Gox investigation. So we roughly track around 80% of the value being transacted on the Bitcoin network, where we can identify one of the sides of the transaction. So we have a pretty good assessment of what the overall flow of Bitcoins are. Thousands of services that we identify. I wanted to even walk through some of the more sophisticated bits of analysis that you can then run. People who've kind of spent a little bit of time, and I'm sure some people recognize the typography of this. This is blockchain.info. Here you've got a Bitcoin transaction, and you've got 65,000 Bitcoin being sent. This is fairly recently. This is summer of last year. This is worth a lot of money. And you can see that the structure of the transaction is that they split this 65,000 Bitcoin into 5 different amounts. And you keep seeing this 20, 20, 20, and then another 65,000 Bitcoin amount. And basically this is a service taking a big chunk of money that they own and splitting it out into different pieces, essentially kind of a little bit like filling ATM machines that then people then withdraw from those 20 Bitcoin amounts. And they do this because of security. But this actually allows us to, once we start to get into this, you can analyze these sorts of patterns. Another kind of interesting thing that you have is that you actually have fee patterns. So temporal analysis about how much fees are these different wallets actually spending. In this case, we were able to tie, several different wallets together based on their temporal nature of using different fees. And, this is kind of where you get into that learning space, because we have some attribution on some of the wallet, and we can then go back and figure out what other parts of the blockchain actually belong to that service. In this case, it was Binance. So, really what we do as a business is to prioritize like unfair advantage. So what are the things that we need to do today that, anyone entering our space after after us will not be able to amass the same data that we actually can tell people about the Bitcoin blockchain today. So, what are the strategies that we need to employ? What are the clustering algorithms that we need to do? Do we need to make more transactions with different services? We've been doing this since 2014. We actually have been sort of actively transacting as founders a lot longer than 2014. And we need to be able to, keep prioritizing that unfair data advantage. What I've shown you here is, roughly only speaking about like our data advantage within the Bitcoin blockchain, but we've been, building out over time teams looking at all these different other cryptocurrencies that are out there because of this fact that you need to be there at the time in order to capture data. Even if that data is preserved forever, no one will be able to amass the same data set if you're the first mover into that space. So, that's basically like the way that we think about our sort of data strategy and data advantage. We serve customers in a variety of different, spaces. We serve cryptocurrency exchanges with this through compliance software. They essentially need us to assess the risk of their customers and get bank accounts. We sell to banks as well who are kind of entering this space. And then maybe more famously, like known for our law enforcement work with investigation tools so that people can actually crack down on cybercrime. But yeah, this is how we think about our data advantage, and I hope maybe some people learn something about how clustering Bitcoin works, not just Bitcoin 101. So yeah, we say that we're building trust in blockchains, essentially engendering trust between all the different participants who take who are transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm based in New York, down on in the Flatiron district. As I said, we have an office in Copenhagen. You can come and visit us there. I split time between both. Thanks.
Jonathan, if you can join me here. So you mentioned in terms of customers that so exchanges were a good customer set. What are you seeing in terms of the broader industry starting to? I guess you guys are almost like a what's the word I'm looking for? A gateway into broader adoption, right, by companies and financial services companies.
Yeah, definitely. So we went about this market in an interesting way. We sort of started out in 2014. As you saw, like the first case was like investigations, and the government was maybe like the earliest adopters of our product. Then what happened was the exchanges need to gain legitimacy, and so we started to engineer more and more products for them. What we're seeing today is that every financial institution wants some slice of this, whether it's providing banking services to an exchange like Coinbase, or whether it's custodying the asset themselves. We typically get like one of those first inbounds, which is like, how do I know that I'm not sending money to North Korea? Which is like a legitimate, barrier between, enterprise adoption, like institutional adoption, and cryptocurrencies. And, what we try and do is like, the worst thing to do is say you should do everything the exchange does. We actually need to like walk them along like an adoption curve that we've learned over the last sort of 3 years of working with these kinds of institutions, which is like if you're a bank today, you're already facilitating a lot of commerce that goes through your bank going to these different services. Let's try and help you understand that first.
And for them, does that fall under the general sort of KYC and AML umbrella, or is that different?
Yeah, so it's definitely in that umbrella for typically what happens is the business unit gets super excited. The innovation team is like, we're launching a cryptocurrency desk Q1 of 2018. Everyone's kind of giggling because they know who I'm talking about. And then, suddenly a lawyer shows up in the room, and now we need to engage compliance. And actually, I realized this in 2015, where I said, there is no way that institutions are actually going to get into this space until the compliance team actually leads from the front. And so, we worked with Barclays very early on to make sure that we understood what that journey looked like.
Very good. All right. Do we have questions?
Hi, my name is Nicolette. I have a very, very basic elementary blockchain question.
Sure.
In terms of just reading on the technology and getting a better understanding of what it is, but where does the data reside? If there's not a single owner, where does the data reside, and how does one then go back to look at any historical transactions and validation?
Yeah, great question. So the data, let's take Bitcoin as an example. Bitcoin is essentially a data structure where the entire history of Bitcoin is written in a way that you can actually download all the transactions that have ever been done in an ordered way, in a way that you will always know where to look for that last chunk of data that you were missing beforehand. And so when you run the Bitcoin client, essentially what it does to the network is it polls the network and it says, hey, I'm stuck in November 2013. Can I fetch the next chunk of data? And someone then gives you the next chunk of data, and you're like, is there any more data? And then someone gives you a little bit more from this peer-to-peer network. So if you just run the standard clients, the reference clients for any of these cryptocurrencies, they automatically go and fetch actually all the data that you would need.
Very good.
Jonathan, thank you. I have a somewhat hardball question. What impact do you think that the ZK snarks is going to have on your business as well as cryptocurrencies in general?
Yeah, so that's actually like a nice softball question. No, so I think
Bring it.
So I think ZK snarks is like a really cool piece of privacy tech. I think that if you were looking on Twitter today, I was chatting to Zuko. He's a friend of mine. I personally think that, like, from my standpoint, institutional money and retail investors actually don't choose to use that type of privacy enhanced technology at the moment because they actually have a good deal of privacy afforded to them by the services that they are using even within Bitcoin. The people who are buying cryptocurrency from real institutions have to hand over data to them, have to trust them with their financial privacy. And so the fact that the blockchain contains ZK snarks or doesn't is kind of a little bit of a red herring. So I think adoption will be quite slow on that.
Where's Ender? I go there.
Thank you. Maybe also a very basic question. If you're able to attribute most of the transactions and the owner of the actual Bitcoin in question, what do you think about if I'm not sure whether I will be using that, will be able to use the wallet that I'm just having some coins transferred in because they've been involved in some savory business. So what does that tell you about your own ability to actually use that in the future?
Yeah, so there's like a fungibility question. So you're saying, like, if you can identify 80% of what's going on, what is the fungibility of Bitcoin? So the way that it works is that essentially I can attribute on a service level. So I can say that this Bitcoin was sent to a gambling service, or this Bitcoin transaction is being received from a darknet marketplace. Actually, as soon as it goes into another service, that is the last counterparty, if you will. And actually, that's the level of detail that we get into. So if the last counterparty that it touched was a nefarious place, that is tying someone to, in some way, like some risky activity. But as soon as that money gets, incorporated into other institutions, exchanges, and stuff like that, the last counterparty that Bitcoin is being touched is like a regulated financial institution, and therefore, the same way that you withdraw money from, Chase, even though it's got traces of cocaine on it, like you can still use that dollar bill.
So the money laundering is included.
Pardon?
The money laundering is included.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, always. Throughout all finance, yeah.
So we have time for a couple more since your talk was below the 15-minute mark.
I was wondering if you've heard of Ocean Protocol or other blockchain-based data vetting and data security systems, and what you think of using blockchain to kind of, vet machine learning data specifically.
Yeah, I'm going to say that is not something that we've been particularly focused on. I am tangentially familiar with like the name Ocean Protocol, but don't really have that much to say about whether blockchains would provide better data integrity than other other measures that people are using. So sorry about that.
And then let's.
So regarding the clustering of different agents in this marketplace together, how much of that is based off of analyzing patterns in individual behavior, and how much of that is based off of analyzing the structure of the network of transactions in this space?
So much more of the former. So actually very little is, and we're getting more sophisticated in understanding, these two nodes transact with each other, on a Friday at 5 p.m., they must be interrelated. A lot of it's much more about the structural nature of the Bitcoin blockchain. Actually, the wallet that is crafting these transactions leaves fingerprints that we can basically pick up on. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
All right, very cool, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks.